It's June 29th, 2026. It seems like it just was the start of the summer, but it's time to talk football. The NHL is gone, the NBA is gone, and I'm ready to share some thoughts. After a wonderful vacation in Canada, it's time to get down and talk football with everybody. Love the idea of talking football and brainstorming and so on. This is the introductory episode. So, what I want to do with this one is just kind of lay out the guidelines as to what I'm going to be discussing probably twice a week, division by division, as we get ready for the 2026 NFL season. Hope everybody's had a great spring and summer and looking forward to football. I will say this, that just because I'm doing this now and I've done all my work and all my work was finished at the end of really at the end of May, everything was finished. It doesn't mean anybody's behind in the process. If you're looking at season futures, win totals, and stuff like that, yeah, you want to get ahead of the curve in some instances. But if you're looking just to bet the season and get ready for week one, you're not behind right now. So hopefully, this process, what I go through, and some of the things I'll be sharing, will be things that you can incorporate into your own preparation for the 2026 season. With that, I'm going to put up what we're going to be doing today. This is what I call the NFL State of the Union. I guess each summer I've done something. I've had special guests last summer talking about what their processes are, how they made it through the business, and so on. This is more nuts and bolts, going division by division. Today, I'm going to be talking just for the next 15 or so minutes on the purpose of this. Basically, the timing, why do it now, the content, what I'm going to be presenting for each division, why PowerPoint, why I'm doing it in a PowerPoint presentation. This will be a little bit different because there are some things that I think will be different for 2026. And I want to share 4 things that I believe will be important for 2026. And then finally, I'll put some of the final thoughts that I have for you and the general show selection. As many people know, I handicap each game from a standpoint, let's say it's Buffalo and New England. I look at Buffalo and handicap each game for Buffalo, look at New England, handicap each game for New England. So I'm really handicapping each game twice before the season even starts. And then from there, I set benchmarks. So in week 8, I've already written down some information on my team sheets and so on, as far as what I expect by this time, what the stats should look like, and so on. And are they meeting it? Are they exceeding it? Are they falling below it? So those are some of the things I've already done. And I've already looked at some of the quirks of the schedule and so on. So with that, we go to the next slide. Why am I doing this to begin with? The purpose of all this. So basically, this is, first of all, self-serving. It helps me to clarify and solidify my own thoughts. I've always believed in writing. I think it's pretty important that people develop a system where they're writing things down for their own personal clarity. I have Excel grids. I have Word documents. I have a lot of different things where I'm honing in my opinions. And then there are proven results as far as what I do, because it is a repeatable process. And that's what you want to achieve. It's something that doesn't make you stray, doesn't make you chase. You want something that you can rely on week after week and year after year. Of course, the second reason is more important. It's sharing. I like to brainstorm. I like to engage with others. I'm very process oriented. If you've seen my shows with other people, if you've seen the weekly shows I do with Las Vegas Chris, we're brainstorming. We're just processing. We go through everything that we believe in through either models, through power ratings, through matchup analysis, situational factors. We're going over everything in a repeatable process consistently. We're brainstorming. I may come up with something. Chris may come up with something. Ted or anybody I'm interacting comes up with something that maybe you haven't thought of that can be part of your decision making. And of course, this is educational. Hopefully, it helps others become grounded as well. All my data points were complete from the end of 2025 through May 20th, and I'll explain that with the next slide. But basically, I have win grids here where I've isolated win percentages as of now for each team for everything on their schedule. I have the weekly schedule. I have who's playing who. I have notes next to the weekly schedule, perhaps historical data, some other things I'm looking up, situational data, which I'll be explaining. I have some games I've already isolated, and I have anything I need at my fingertips as far as new coach data, new coordinator data, new special teams coordinators, GMs, and so on. I have all that by May 15th. Believe it or not, nothing much changes between May 15th and August 15th. When you get to the preseason, then we're going to find out more about how the new coaches are approaching the new season, new schemes, how some of the new draftees are coming into play, what we can glean from the 2 or 3 exhibition games that they're going to have. But between May 15th and August 15th, there's not much more that we need. Any new information can be absorbed quickly, trades, holdouts, injuries. It takes minutes to manage, and it probably doesn't even affect the current power rating that one would have on a team, but it gives you some idea about roster depth if somebody somehow gets traded after June 1st, if Brandon Ayuk lands with a team, so on and so forth. I could have done this at the end of May. I was ready to really do this, put the PowerPoint together at the end of May. But I waited because I know June 1st is an important date nowadays as far as what goes on. In fact, after June 1st, we had the Myles Garrett trade. We had the Giants trio of signings. And then we had the A.J. Brown trade. So I was able to incorporate all this and still give you this information and put together this information at the end of June, which is still over 2 months from the start of the season. So what's going to be included in each show, which will probably run around 25 minutes as a guess for each show. We're going to cover I'm going to cover a different division. So there'll be 8 shows, NFC West all the way through, AFC West all the way through. Each end of season data point is going to be covered in some brief mention. The stats that I think are important that carry over to the next year, free agency information, a brief draft recap, because Ted and I, with some special guests, have already done some draft recaps, and you can refer to, if you subscribe to my channel, or if you've listened in the past, watched in the past, or if you haven't, if you're new to this and you want to catch up on what we thought in detail about each team's draft, we did that a couple months ago. I'm also going to talk about unanswered questions and 2026 expectations. I'll give you the odds as of about 10 days ago before I went away to Canada, what the odds are, season wins and so on, and some thoughts right now as we stand at the end of June, which are of course subject to change. Most of the power ratings that I've already developed aren't going to change much really between now and the start of the season. They're within a half a point, at most a point from each other. So each team will have some 2025 statistical information, such as sacks, turnovers, that I think are important, that you may or may not think of as important. But again, what I'm trying to do is give you a framework, because maybe you want to set up your own process that replicates or goes through this. You're welcome. The reason I put this in kind of PowerPoint form is so that you can see it. It's visually easier to see rather than look at me. Coaches, changes in staff are noted here with some occasional comments, because sometimes it's a drastic change in staff. Sometimes it's not as much. Free agency, my brief summary of what happened, my take on the schedule, difficulty, and other nuggets. And I got to tell you, situational factors are going to be important this year, and we'll get to that. List of draft choices and very brief thoughts about each team. So, for example, the unanswered questions might include, will the offensive line improve pass protection? Maybe a team in question allowed over 50 sacks last year, or they've allowed 100 or more sacks in the last 2 years. What changes have they made? What will those changes result in sacks decreasing or increasing if you're on the defensive end? Those are some unanswered questions, all phrased for each team. The expectations I think that the team has and expectations that I have, which are often the same but can differ. Maybe some teams think it's Super Bowl or bust, and I think based on the way they drafted in free agency and the other teams in their division, I don't think it's Super Bowl or bust. Really, their ceiling might be lower, or vice versa. I'll have that in. I'll have the win totals and the current power numbers and final thoughts. So you're getting a lot of information, team by team, 4 teams, each division, 4 teams per show. Let's move on. Why PowerPoint? Very easy for you to see. You can copy this if you want. You may not agree with all the points that I put in there, but you may put in points of their own. You may develop your own PowerPoint system. Just something to get you grounded. I really believe in the process. It's more important than I like Green Bay over Chicago this week. It's why do I like Green Bay over Chicago? And it's that repeatable process that will make handicappers better, in my opinion. This has staying power. You could refer to this more than once, more than just this show. Hopefully encourage others to put up your own checkpoints. Whether you agree or disagree, it doesn't matter. We're all trying to get ready for the NFL season in one way, shape, or form. Okay, so this is new, and this is something that I'm not going to have in the other slides, but there are 4 things that I believe differentiate 20. Every year is different. Every year is unique. And the game is evolving. We've seen teams run for higher yards per carry. We've seen RPOs in the past. We've seen 5 defensive backs instead of 4. We've seen more 12 and 13 personnel. We've seen more 2 tight ends on the field at the same time. And in the Rams' case, 3 tight ends on the field. The game's always evolving. And because of that, the way we handicap the games, there might be some subtle changes. This is my opinion. You may agree or disagree, but here's what I think will be important. I don't know if you can read this, you can expand this, but I'll read off this. Situational handicapping will be more important than ever in 2026. And I know that bothers modelers, but this is just a fact. Roger Goodell doesn't care about player safety as much as we think he does, because he's got teams playing on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, Thursdays, 5 days for short weeks, a 6-day followed by another 6-day. He's got teams scheduled the day before Thanksgiving, the day after Thanksgiving, the triple header on Christmas, and so on and so forth. Never has been more of a divide in rest differential, and it affects the way the games are played. We thought Sunday to Thursday, some of those games can be sloppy. Well, now it's a little different now when you have Fridays and you have Wednesdays and so on. There's going to be some uneven play because one team's going to have a 6-day rest differential and another team's going to have a 10 or even a 14-day rest differential. And especially if you're talking about week 9, 10, 11, 12, and you haven't had the bye week yet, you're going to have changes in performance. That's just a factor of human nature as far as what's going on. So it's just not plugging in numbers, but situationally, if you don't count week 1 because nobody's played before then, and if you don't count week 18 where everybody's playing at the same time, we are up to nearly 50% of the games where one team has at least a 1-day rest differential, and in many, many, many cases, maybe half of those cases, a 3-day differential or more. And like I said, some teams will play consecutive games on short weeks. I use, as you've heard me say in podcasts, matchup analysis, which is my way of modeling, power numbers, because that's very important to see whether or not, if my power numbers are off, that means I think one team is perceptually better than another compared to what Las Vegas or offshore thinks, and situational handicap. Sometimes power numbers do not come into play because the numbers are so close. The matchup analysis will tend to be something or another, but sometimes an edge for one side in a particular area is an edge for another side in another particular area, so they could match up. And situational handicapping does not apply to every game, but it's going to apply more than ever this year. I get a real good handle on coaches. I will miss Mike Tomlin. I think my record is like 38-6 ATS in the last 44 games, whereas other people had a lot of trouble deciphering Pittsburgh last year. I know because I talked to a lot of those people. I was something like 8-1 or 9-1 in Pittsburgh games, because Mike Tomlin's model doesn't change. He's such a straight shooter. If he tells you we're going to increase our sack rush, our pass rush next year, they actually do. If they're going to play more man on man and he tells you that, they actually do. A lot of their long-term situations over 18 or 19 years of coaching came through year after year after year. Same thing with John Harbaugh. Same thing with Sean McDermott of Buffalo. Those three guys are gone now. And a lot of those changes, the changes that those teams made, Joe Brady may be a little bit of a difference, but Mike Tomlin, a big difference, John Harbaugh, a big difference, and so on. I'm a little worried about how I'm going to approach, and some of those situational factors are going to go away. Now, the scheduling situational factors are going to increase, but the coaching situational factors that I use, unfortunately, are going to decrease. Obviously, using models, whether it be power ratings, whether it be matchup analysis, whether it be plugging things into a computer, is still very, very important. But I've talked to a lot of modelers who said that for straight bets, the performance was uneven the last 2 years, maybe even longer for some people, and they're worried about their models. And quite frankly, I think modeling is harder sometimes when you have these rest differentials and you're balancing off against situational factors. A lot of modelers aren't crazy about incorporating situational factors because some of them are very subjective. I believe that, and I admit to that as well. You have to have a feel for the game to use situational factors. But if you ignore them completely, I think that's why modelers have had a tougher time when you're talking about all these rest differentials and trap games and games against divisional opponents that took a lot out of you, or an overtime game, and so on and so forth. There's a lot of things changing in football because the NFL is no longer a league. If you looked even 5, 6, 7 years ago, certainly 20 years ago, the league was basically a Thursday, Sunday, Monday, and nothing else. And predictably, you would be able to say that no team had such an extreme rest differential as we'll see, and how I will point out the rest differentials when we get to the actual divisional previews. It's crazy. Second, August and September could be more important than ever. An unprecedented 10 new head coaches. We've got to analyze what's going on. Preseason, which can be meaningless for teams like the Rams and the Jaguars and other teams that don't play their starters, not even one down. But you've got to get the insight as to what's going on and what the schemes are, what's going on, and any anomalies that you see in terms of performance during the 3 preseason games need to be at least looked at. You don't go deep dive and say, wow, this happened, it's going to happen, but you have to take note of it because some of that does carry over. 24 out of 32 teams have either a new head coach and or an offensive coordinator or defensive coordinator. So that means 75% of the teams are possibly going to have some scheme differences. 30 teams have made at least one of these changes in the last 14 months or so. We have to beware of unsustainable, slower, fast starts because the staff took advantage of other teams. Maybe teams with more established coaches played a lot of new coaches early and took advantage of it, but maybe their team isn't as good as we think, or the other way around. A new coach just needed a little extra time to get the systems in place. And maybe it was a tough schedule. Maybe it was a tough early road schedule. And so we look at their performance in September and we say, oh, they're not very good. But maybe after their bye week and they can recalibrate, they're going to be better. We have to be aware that we have to make some changes and not just rely completely on data from weeks 1 to 4. Why do I think 2026 will be different from the last 2 years? Very easy to identify the top teams and the bottom teams the last few years. I know Kansas City and Buffalo had struggles last year, but their power rating was still sufficiently high that they were among the top 6 to 8 teams anyway. It was just the close game. They lost a few of the close games. Kansas City had close game regression and so on. But we knew the Jets were bad. We knew the Raiders were bad. We've been very easily able to separate the top 6 or 8 teams and very easily able to separate the bottom 5, 6 teams. It may not be as easy this year because we had 7 or 8 teams that had multiple first round draft choices. And I've never seen this before, but the teams that had multiple draft choices, the Jets, the Giants, the Browns, other teams, the Chiefs even, and so on, the teams that had multiple first round draft choices, they actually did a great job of drafting. I have not seen so many lower rated teams with low power ratings, actually improve their roster as much as I have this year. So I think the bottom teams have improved. The top teams, a lot of them didn't even have first round draft choices. They may not have improved unless they did some drastic things in free agency. So we're going to see, I think, more of a regression to the mean, which means I think it's going to be a little bit harder to differentiate some of the bottom teams and some of the top teams. Just keep that in mind. And with this in mind, finally, the fourth thing is don't be afraid. If you're a win total better like I am and so on, and I have these win totals going on, don't be afraid to make win totals in September after you've seen 2 or 3 games, because it's quite possible you may disagree that a team that starts off 3-1 really isn't a 3-1 team. Their stat sheet, the circumstances behind their first few games, maybe you catch some value in fading them because they're not really as good as 3-1. And conversely, a 1-3 team that lost a couple of close games or their schemes weren't quite ready, now they ease up, they have more home games, or maybe they have an early bye week, something like that. You might be able to get value backing them as you go on. Remember, most true handicappers never react or overreact to weeks 1 and 4. We don't transfer our data until at least after 3 weeks have been played, and I don't transfer my data and fully commit to 2026 for most of the teams until after 4 weeks have been in. Okay, some final thoughts. The first divisional preview will be this Thursday. I will start with the AFC East. So if you're curious about my thoughts, and as I go through the stats and the free agency and the draft and so on and so forth about Buffalo, New England, the Jets, and Miami, that's Thursday at noon, all the shows. I plan to try to stick to a Tuesday and Thursday schedule and try to stick to a noon so that you can bookmark it if you're interested. The best estimate will be that each show will last about 25 minutes. And if you watch live, I will try. I won't always be able to do that. I will try to go ahead and look at the comments. I'm looking at some of the comments now. Hector, good to see you. Yeah, the beard is on. I don't know how long it'll be on. And have I ever traveled to European countries? All the time travel to European countries. Haven't in the last year or so. Spain, Italy, who knows, France, England. We love to travel, my wife and I. So we definitely enjoy that. So that's basically where we are in terms of what each show will be. And I want to thank you in advance for anybody who watches these previews, who listens to these previews, who, health permitting, I'll be on shows July, August to talk and brainstorm more with some super handicappers all the way through. I'm thinking of 2 or 3 shows that Ted and I can do that will bring on some other handicappers to get different perspectives. Of course, hopefully Chris and I will be back if both of us are healthy enough to share our weekly kind of phone call podcast. So I thank you. I don't have a large audience. I don't sell picks. I give out more process information than anything. I've done this for 4 decades. I've done this very successfully for 4 decades. It's only been the last few years that I've been more willing to share some of the process. I kind of wanted to be secretive for the first 30 years, let's say, because there were things that, especially before the boom of podcasts and before the internet area and all, and AI and stuff like that, there were still edges that I had by not sharing. But now, twilight of my career, I'd rather share. So anything and everything I'm willing to answer through direct mail, through the podcast system, whatever you want to ask me, I'm willing to go ahead and do this. My audience is small, so if you wouldn't mind by subscribing and passing the word on, if you like what I've been doing, then please do, because I'd enjoy speaking to an even larger audience. Every once in a while, I might be on a particular national show, but mostly it's just me, me and Ted, me and Chris, and so on. So that's it for today. That's kind of the overview. You'll see the process in action as we go from slide to slide, about 5 or 6 minutes per team with the AFC East. Thursday at noon Pacific time, 3 p.m. on the East Coast, we'll go to the AFC East. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in a couple of days.